Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Friends of Brry. We have a very special guest with us today. His name is Omar Maldanado. I hope I said that right. But anyways, he is a financial advisor at Thrivent Financials. And today I just wanted to invite him on to talk about a little bit about money, a little bit about who he is. And I hope you all enjoy, because this is a show where your friends are my friends and my friends are your friends. So here we go in our interview. Omar, thanks for joining us.
Hey, brother, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing as good as I can. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. Been busy. It's you know this. You've been here. I mean, I still got 3 kids at home, so they've been keeping me going like every morning. And then the like their sleep patterns are all off, because you remember my youngest, he's 9, right? And so
Yeah.
I can't get them kids to sleep. It's been crazy. Like one night that kid was up at 2 a.m. and I was going out of my skull. Like, it's been crazy.
I think we can all agree. It's hard to implement this, but I think every parent is still in that mix of like trying to find the routine with kids, because the routine's completely out the door. So it's just like, how do you get them into this routine when they don't really have a set time to be anyway, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, from someone that's used to implementing routine like all the time, that's a little difficult for me to adjust to, because they're not. They think they're on summer vacation already. They've been on summer vacation for like a month already. So
So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your background, your story.
yeah.
I like how you're from Puerto Rico. That makes you a United States citizen,
Right. Yeah.
which people don't know that.
Yeah, no, I've gotten all kinds of crazy stuff. Well, and the thing is, so being from Puerto Rico too, right? Like, so being from Puerto Rico, you can just look like anybody, right? Like that's pretty much like, it's just like any other state, right? But Puerto Rico is such a mix of people. Like, you know, my youngest, he's blonde hair, blue eyes, right? And you know, and then I have, you know, then we have like my dad, who's like really dark. Right, he's like way darker than me, and then in the summertime, you know, like him, like my brother, they get super dark. So yeah. So, but anyway, it's I'm from Puerto Rico, like you said, and moved here when I was a little kid. I was like, you know, I moved to the DC area when I was like 3, and I lived in Fairfax, Virginia, for a while until I was about in 3rd grade, where I moved to St. Louis, Missouri. And been here ever since. I am a resident of Kirkwood. So yeah, go Pioneers. That's a big thing out here. And yeah, I love it where I'm at, man. I love my neighborhood, love being here in St. Louis. I have a lot of
fun. So actually, when I first met you, I thought you were Middle Eastern.
Yeah.
You ever get that?
Because you know, it's one of those faces I just kind of say I feel blessed to have, because I can just kind of shift from this group to that group. So I get Middle Eastern, I get Greek, depending on like the time of year. Sometimes my skin like goes olive, I'll get Italian, you know, and then with Maldonado as a last name, you know, it can be up to anything, you know. So I get all kinds of stuff.
So question with the last name, are you related to Joe Exotic?
No, not. And by the way, he got that after he married that one guy. So that's not his.
The second husband?
I think it was the second husband. Yeah.
But are you related to the second husband?
No. No, actually. And you know, it's funny, like people ask me that all the time, but it's one of the, so Maldonado in like Spanish speaking countries, it's like Smith. It's just a really common last name. Actually, you know what, Brry? I researched it. It like goes all the way, like the earliest we can find, like goes all the way back to like the 1200s in Spain. And Maldonado, there was actually a Maldonado that came over. They was that was during all the time where they were coming in and reaching the the new lands and things like that, and they would explore. They came in through the Caribbean islands, and then went down through like what we now know as like South America and things like that. So that Maldonado name like traveled everywhere.
Cool story. So, what is it that you do at Thriving Financial?
I help people get better at their golf swing. That's I do what I do so that they can go do the things that they love. So no, but really, what I do is so I'm a financial professional, and I help people out in all different types of areas. So there's things that we talk about, like I talk to people about budgeting. I talk to people about saving up for like college. I talk to people about putting things in protection. I talk to people about what does life going to look like after they choose to retire, things like that. So I look at the whole thing. So my conversation is a little bit different than what a lot of people are used to.
Gotcha. And so how did you get into that?
Totally like I got into so that's a funny story. So I did not want to be a financial planner. In fact, like when I talk to people or financial professional, when I talk to people in my industry, other financial professionals, like rarely anybody gets into this industry because they wanted to. In fact, so I was at the time, I was actually I was in a place where I didn't know what I wanted to do. My family had a flooring company, and I was working there, but I kind of felt like I hit a ceiling. And I had kind of moved up the ranks through our business, and I got to the position of VP, and I liked it, but I just didn't feel really like I didn't feel what's the word I'm looking for, fulfilled. And so I was doing a lot of nonprofit work, and I found myself at a point where I was like working, 40 something hours a week. I was doing about 20 hours of nonprofit work. And then I was putting myself back through school again to get a new degree. And so I was like, this isn't working. I need to find something that I find fulfillment. And I was going to church, and it was a Sunday. I remember. Well, actually, here's what happened. I'd been trying to figure it out on my own, right? And I was trying to figure out like, okay, what should I do? And I was just hitting all these barriers, and I couldn't really figure it out. And finally, I remember it was a Saturday, and I was in my kitchen, and I got so frustrated with the whole situation of really not finding what I wanted to do that I kind of threw my hands up, and I'm like, all right, I'm done, figuring this out. And I was kind of mad, right? And I was kind of, I was also at the time, to be truthful, I was kind of mad at God, right? And I was like, I'm done. This is ridiculous. Then I realized, okay, I've been trying to figure out all this stuff on my own. And I was in my kitchen. I was like, all right, God, I give up. I give up trying to do this on my own. I give up trying to figure all this out. This isn't working. So, you know what? I'm just going to sit back and you tell me what it is that you want me to do. Okay. And the thing is that Thriving actually had reached out to me before. And when they reached out to me before, I was like, I don't want to be a financial advisor. Like, nobody likes financial planners or everybody calls them financial advisors. Like, nobody likes those people. They come to your house and they're trying to take your money, and at least that's how I felt, right? They're always asking me how much is in a 401k. Hey, let's bring it over here. And I was like, I don't want to be that guy. I was like, that guy sucks. So I'd actually told them like, whatever. I kind of blew it all off. And so on that Saturday, I was mad, and I was like, all right, God, like whatever you want. You just like, I'm done. You tell me what it is I want to do. And once I hear from you what that is, then I'll go do it. Right. Important lesson here, by the way, be careful what you ask for, because it usually comes to you. The very next day at church, there was this whole sermon about like how you could be, and I remember it so clearly, like about how you could be a Christian in everything that you do. Because I had been trying to figure out, do I go to work in the church? Do I do this or whatever, right? And I was like, no, I'm not good enough. I'm not a good enough person to work in the church. And in the sermon, and then I remember him distinctly saying, whatever it is that you do, put all of your heart into it, and make God first in that, so that they can see basically that you're a Christian through your work, right? And man, that hit me. It felt like I got like in the back of my head, man. And I was sitting there in a pew, and I was like, boom, and I was like, oh, okay, I get it. And this is why, because Thrivent was like the out of everybody that I talked to, they were the only not-for-profit, faith-based financial organization in the entire Fortune 500. And so I was just like, okay. And it was just loud and clear, like a big voice, like, boom, you need to go talk to these people. I was like, all right. So dude, this was like less than 24 hours after that little hissy fit I threw in my kitchen, right? And so I was like, all right, got it. Very next day, I called them up and I was like, look, I wasn't in a position to really listen to you guys last time, but for reasons that I'm not going to get into, I think we should revisit this conversation. And about 7 interviews later, I said, okay, yeah, let's do this. And I've been there ever since. Love it. It's been the most gratifying thing that I've done in any career. It's just been amazing. I get to come home every day, like I sleep well, I feel good, I get to help people, like it's awesome. So yeah, that's how I got here.
So if you had to talk to somebody who was in the position you were in, what is the biggest encouragement that you could offer them?
Like what do you mean?
Like just I what do I do? Like God give me the sign, and them feeling that like you said be careful with what you ask for, but then like it just felt like this is what I was supposed to do. So what encouragement do you, if somebody finds them they're in that place before you had the flick, what is like something that you can encourage people?
Well, so here's the thing. Here's what I found. And what's funny is like we go through these same motions like everywhere in life, right? And that is what I found is that a lot of times we're trying to figure out what's going to work best for me, right? And naturally so, because that's how we're set up to be. Like I got to take care of this, I got to take care of that, so that my life can be better. But what I found is that in all that noise, right, and all that noise that's coming about how I can be better, or how I can handle this situation, or how I can handle that situation, it doesn't actually allow me to listen to what's going on, right? And there's a difference between trying to figure things out and just trying to be with things. And that being able to, in the midst of all that, in the midst of trying to figure it out, oh, this is going to work or it's not going to work, being able to just sit back and just and give that up, and for me it's offering it up to God, right? Everybody does something a little bit different, but for me it's just offering up to God and saying, all right, I need to just let this be, right, and let you do your thing, but really just go to a shift, a transition of saying, okay, I'm going to listen for what's going to make a difference. And it's in that listening for that all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, I get it. Because what's so funny is that prior to that, like it's sometimes it's like in front of our face, like all the time. We just don't see it because we're not listening for it. We're just we get so caught up in trying to figure it out, right? And what that looks like, for example, is I remember one time I had this breakthrough, right, in life, and I was like, oh my gosh, honey. I came home and it was like 11 o'clock at night and my wife's in the kitchen. I was like, honey, you would not believe what I just figured out today. I just figured out that I've been doing yada, 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 right? And because I've been doing that, it's actually been keeping me from really being like connected, with you and this and so on and so forth. And she turns to me and she's like, I've been telling you that for years. Right? That's the whole thing. Like, I wasn't listening for it. Like, I was trying to figure it out, so I didn't see it, right? So I think people can relate to that when we get caught up in trying to figure it out instead of just letting it be and just saying, okay, like, what's actually there? That's what I found is really makes the difference for me.
That's what I call them. I call them bright eyes moments. Because of the song "Turn Around, Bright Eyes." So that song just going off in your head, like, oh yeah, it was right in front of me all the time. But sometimes people don't know where to look, And
Right.
One thing that I love about you is that when we first sat down to meet, I was just like, oh, here we go, another financial advisor.
Right?
I heard he's cool, but you shifted the conversation. You said it all starts with the conversation.
Yeah.
And when we're not looking and we're all making all these excuses in our head, we're avoiding that conversation when it's right in front of us. And so I would like you, what is the power of a conversation? Whether it's in your line of business or just in life in general.
Yeah. So I love that you say that because it really does come down to conversation. And here's the thing. So like the thing that I find, and look, it's not just in like my industry, right? Like we see this with people just hanging out, right? Don't you have like everybody's got that, the one friend or the one person that comes in there and then like you're trying to have these conversations, they always divert it back to something else. You're like, dude, you're not listening, right? And I've been guilty of that too. Like I think we all do it to some level. But it all starts in the conversation. And when I'm having a conversation with somebody, like I'm really trying to come from a place of where I'm just like intrigued, right? Like I really want to like know more. And so when I'm listening to someone share, like I'm really wanting to understand where are you coming from? What is it that you're dealing with? And I kind of get excited about it. I kind of, for me, that conversation, I get all like, oh, wow, that is so cool. Because everybody's different. Everybody's dealt with so many different things, right? And so I'm listening. I want to listen for, what is it that you're dealing with? I think, unfortunately, what people do just in like general business practices, right? Like it doesn't matter. Like people want to fix stuff all the time. So they love telling you what you got to do, right? So, you got to, you have somebody that's working, at Home Depot or something, right? And Brian, we're going in there and we need, we're like, hey, I need a drill, right? And then right away they're like, oh yeah, go down to, I don't know, aisle 23. You're going to get all kinds of great drills over there, right? But then, if you think about it, that's how most people react, right? But you're not really finding out anything whatsoever, and that doesn't really help people because, if you would start asking questions, then you can find out, oh, well, why do you, what's going on? What do you need a drill for, right? And it's like, oh, hey, well, I need a drill because I need to hang this picture, in my living room. And then you're like, oh, well, what kind of picture is it? Well, it's this picture. It's pretty big, but it's not super heavy. And they're like, well, you don't need a drill. You just, you need to just take, we have these picture hangers that are built for frames that can hold up to like 25 pounds, right? And that's, that's on aisle, 12. Why don't you go use that, right? That's a little bit more elevated, right? But the conversation that I like to have is to kind of go a little bit deeper and say, oh, wait, what's going on with that picture, right? They're like, is it like a family picture? Is it a family photo? Like what's going on there? I'm like, no, I'm just hanging up the picture because I busted a hole in my wall and it looks like crap. So I need to just, I don't know how to fix a hole in my wall. So I just figured if I put up a picture, I got it. I'm like, Oh man, you don't need any of that. You don't need the drill. You don't need the hanger. I got something super easy over here that can help you like actually fix the wall so it looks like new. I'll show you how to do it. And you don't need to go out and buy a picture, spend your money on that or none of it. You just have a fixed wall, right? And that's the conversations that I want to have because unfortunately, in the world out here, like people want to fix things all the time, and that doesn't actually work. But by getting to really understanding what it is that you've gone through in life or what it is that you're dealing with, we can actually go peel back all those layers and see, oh, here's what's actually going on. Because if I would have gave you that hanger to hold up your picture, you still got a hole in the wall, right? And every time you look at your picture, you're like, oh yeah, there's that hole in the wall. So those are that's why I love having those conversations. I get to know people on a whole different level. I get to know, what it is that they're up to and what it is that they, what they want to accomplish in life. So that, I think that is, for me, like, that is the biggest, most important piece out of everything that I do is just have a conversation and listen to what people are dealing with.
Yeah, I think it's super important. Like we can always be quick to want to solve the problem, and so we automatically just dismiss the people.
Yeah.
And we ultimately jump to product, right? But it's really cool how you can actually get to know people through a certain thing and like their answers. And it's kind of like when I go to the doctor. I hate doctors who don't know anything about me, right? And then they ask me all these generic questions like, do you have sex? I'm like, no. Do you do drugs? No. And my answer every time is no, 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 no. And come on, like get to know me, like get to know who I am and like what I'm going through. And then you actually see that I care enough about my body and I care enough about my diet and exercise, like to not do those things, like, right? Like, but yeah, so many times we're not actually listening. We're just waiting to talk. And we quickly sum it up like, I cry for you, rather than finding out all the details and like hoping accordingly.
Yeah. And there's really something behind that. And by the way, I just want to say, hey, I just saw that Bailey commented on this video. So, hey, Bailey, we miss you. But anyway, but yeah, no, like when people go about fixing it, it's funny because it's really like there's a commitment behind it all, right? So like in our conversation, there's a commitment to something, right? So my commitment, it comes from like, I want to get to know you and I really want to know about what it is that you're dealing with. Like, what is that like for you? Like, how has that impacted you? Like, how have you lived your life because of it, right? And that's all coming from a place of curiosity, right? But when we come from a place when our commitment is like, oh, I need to get paid, right? Or, oh, I need to make money, or, oh, I need a sale, or, oh, I need to bring these over accounts. Well, that starts showing through in the conversation because what you're doing is you're focusing on those things, right? You're focusing on the money, or you're focusing on accounts, or you're focusing on how can I bring this person over, right? And you'll start hearing that in language, right? Where all of a sudden the focus starts becoming that. Mm-hmm. And so like I said earlier, and like you mentioned, even like when we first met, when we were at Caldi's, right? Like, is this most people, and again, in my industry too, like that's how they talk. And it comes across loud and clear. And it's what it reminds me of? Remember, those commercials were like, have you gone nose blind? Right? You got the college kid with the big giant sock in in his room. But yeah, it's like, we've kind of gone blind to those things. So like, oh, hey, that's what our conversation smells like. It smells like that. Yeah. So it really comes from a place of commitment, I think. And I think our language is so important because it's really, if we look at that, it paints a picture as to, who we are and what it is that we're up to.
Yeah. And somebody just actually put in the comments that listening and hearing are two different things. And I do think that is an important thing to have because maybe some people know this, maybe some people don't. I don't have the sexy accent because I'm from somewhere. I actually just have it because I'm deaf and hard of hearing. So I've had to actually learn to compensate for my inability to hear by actively listening. And so I think this hearing is your God-given gift, but listening is a skill that God gave you the opportunity to develop.
Yeah, yeah, and like, what are we listening for though, too, right? Like, because it's funny. I was just having this conversation earlier with a friend of ours who's also a neighbor, and we were talking about somebody can say something, right, and you'll have two different people that hear two different things, right, and it's based on what they're hearing is based on their own perception of what's going on, right? The problem with that is that they're really listening from their perception, right? How do we start listening from your perception, right, from your context? How do I, and it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, this, you and I've had conversations about this before. Like, that's it takes some training, right? Like, it really does. Like, it takes training, when you're having conversations with your clients, Brian. Like, that's, you're teaching them how to do those things, right? To how do you remove your view that can potentially taint someone else's expression? So how do you remove what you're dealing with from the conversation so that you could really listen for what's there, and almost like you're almost making a clearing, right? So that you can be like,
Right.
oh, okay, I can just really be with them. Yeah.
If I had it my way, I would encourage like every business person to go out and network for like an entire week without actually saying anything. Give the platform to like everybody else and just like shut up and just listen for an entire week. Don't even say anything back. I mean, nod your head to agree, like you're listening, like let people know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But I think that's a great exercise. But here's also another trick that I do when I'm grabbing like coffee with people.
Yeah.
I'll get the biggest coffee I can find. And just I will pay attention to how much I'm drinking, because I noticed that I drink more when I'm not talking. And so based on how much is left in the cup is whether I'm actively listening or not.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
So if I'm sitting there drinking, if the whole thing's gone, like, see, look, I'm almost done with my water. This was full at the beginning of the interview, but I'm just listening to what you have to say right now. And my like water's almost gone. So that's a good thing,
Yeah.
But there's certain tricks and tips that you can use to measure your ability of listening,
Yeah, I absolutely agree. You're talking about networking. Like, I don't even bring cards with me anymore. I stopped bringing cards when I network. So, and a big reason why I do that is because, like, when you're going out and you're networking with people, what I found is that the tendency is to want to just promote your services all the time, which I get. But look, here's the thing: is like there's 50 million people in St. Louis that do what I do. Like, okay, like, you don't need my card to know what I do. That's pretty simple. You can go onto my website or whatever, right? But they don't get to know who you are, because that's what I feel truly makes the difference. So what I'd stop doing is, like, when I go out and network, like, I don't even bring a card anymore. Like, let's talk, and if you want to continue to get to know me, then I'll just give you, my virtual card over the phone, and we'll just go about that way. So I don't even bring them anymore.
Yeah. What I find interesting is, well, I mean, whatever works for people works for people. But I always like the idea of doing business as, getting to know people, because it is about who you know.
Yeah.
but also I don't try to sell anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I just like people know I'm a life coach and people
Mm-hmm.
know I'm a speaker, and I just put that out there. If you're interested, great, let's talk.
Yeah.
If you're not, like, I want to know you.
Right.
But I'm more concerned about knowing you and how I can help you rather than, hey, here's my business card. Do you ever hire speakers? Do you like? I don't like that pushiness. And so whenever I get a contact from somebody and I'm like genuinely reaching out because I want to know them, sometimes it goes really bad because they just spent the last hour not really getting to know me. But I learned a lot about them by what they're selling. And I think they attach themselves to what they're selling. So I think I have an idea of who they are, but it just kind of went down here.
Well, and like, I mean, if you think about this too, like, as I was having a conversation with somebody, we were over at Starbucks some months back, and she was talking about she needed some repairs done in the house, and I'm like, oh, hey, like, here's somebody that you should talk to. I have somebody, right? And she started laughing. She goes, that's what I love about you. She's like, if I need something, like you know somebody, like I don't have to go anywhere. I can just be like, Omar, like, do you know someone that does this, right? And really though, I feel like that's so important because we as human beings can add so much value when we're really coming from a place of how can I help you, right? Like it doesn't have to be specifically in your industry, right? But by doing that, we can really add value and make someone's life so much better by not having to figure out how, who they can trust or not trust, right? So going back to like the networking thing, a lot of times what I'm doing is I'm vetting people. Like I have a group of people that I utilize for different things that I've vetted. Mm-hmm. I use myself, and what I do many times when people are dealing with stuff, I'm like, oh, hey, I know someone. It's like, are you okay if I have them give you a call? Right? It's like, so people will call me for whatever. They're like, hey, I need a babysitter. I'm like, I got someone. She's 12. She lives in my house. So just coming from the place of always wanting to give, like help people out. I think that's huge.
Yeah. So for those who are just like tuning in, we're like 30 minutes into this interview. Today I have Omar Maldanado. I hope I say that right. Maldanado.
You said it perfect.
Maldanado. Just
Omar, man. Like everybody around St. Louis just knows me as Omar.
There's like three, getting people's full names right.
Like, well, and there's like 3 Omars in St. Louis. So like you're gonna get one of us. So it's all good.
But anyways, so you're a financial advisor at Thrivent Financials, mm-hmm. and we've been talking about how your conversations can truly matter and stuff. But I kind of want to get more in the nitty gritty of one thing I like that you do, that your business does, and I don't know if it's the entire Thrivent group, but I just know you. And what I think is really cool is that not only do you help people finance, you also help people outside of Thrivent. Like before all this stuff went, you invited me to a fundraiser you were doing for first responders.
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember the name of the organization?
Yeah, Responder Rescue. Yeah, Responder Rescue. Yeah. So Responder Rescue is a great organization. They're a local nonprofit. A lot of people in the St. Charles area are familiar with like the King's Ball. Like they put that on. It's a amazing organization. What they do is that they help first responders that have become injured on the job, right? So there's other organizations, some very well-known organizations that will help the families of first responders that have died. What Responder Rescue does is they help the family and the first responders that have become disabled because of their job and what they do, right? So we had my partner, Brittany Miller, and I, we had a wonderful opportunity to do something for them and show, let people know more about the organization and how they can help out. It's easy, like those little tiny things, like they make such a huge difference, right? And I'm so happy that like now with the whole COVID situation, like people are paying attention to, first responders and things like that. But the reality is that people have needed assistance way before all this has happened. This has just helped us hyper focus and see what it is that they're actually dealing with, just in a different light.
Yeah. So I know you're a huge giver though. And what I say in all my speaking stuff is life is not about what you can get, it's about what you can give.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you feel about that?
Oh, I absolutely. We did a study as to, when I say we, I'm talking about our company, did a study as to what has people feel the most successful, right? So we did this whole thing of like, if you took a range between being just trying to survive in life, right, all the way through being in surplus and everything in between, what they found was the people that felt like they were living in surplus actually had very little to do with money at all. A big chunk of it, a big reason why they felt like they were in surplus was a couple different things. But one of the things that stood out, which we kind of knew, because this is who we are as a company, but one of the things that stood out was the fact that those people that were in surplus actually gave. They were doing things to give back. They had charitable intent. They either, whether their time, their talent, or their treasure, right? Because think about this. Think about the last time you did something that was like really nice for somebody, and you did it only because you wanted to, not because you felt like you were pressured to, or you felt guilty or anything like that, but like I really want to do this because I want to help this person out or this group out, right? When you do that, like, isn't there a sense of like, first off, you feel a sense of fulfillment, right? But there's also somewhere in the back of your mind, like a recognition of like, wow, like I got things good. Like I'm really well off. Like like my life is pretty good, right? And so that all those things start servicing when we give back, when we really come from a place of money's not a thing to achieve, it's simply a tool in life, and we can do that to better our lives and the lives of others, right? And it's really cool because I think when we give back, when we start there's this affinity for humanity, that starts getting created like right here, and it just people see that, it's like it shines on its own.
Yeah, and I think that it's also important, like having monetary goals are good. But what do you want to use the money for?
Right,
Like
yeah.
Like most people would like $1 million, and it's just like, but they never have the conversation of like, what would you do with $1 million?
Right.
And if somebody gave me $1 million, I would be like, wow, I have a tool that I can help so many people.
Yeah.
Like I can invest some of it so I can help more people with that. But I can also just imagine add an extra dollar to spare. And sometimes it's not even doing it out of the safe fest. Sometimes it's doing it out of the goodness of your heart, saying, hey, I have nothing, but I want to pay it forward.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up, people do that all the time, right? Like, how many times have you sat down with friends? If I won the lottery, this is what I do, right? And we start having all these, these dreams of grandeur, right? But one thing to think about is like, okay, it's not actually the $1 million, but what does the $1 million in your mind, what does that actually allow you to do that you're not doing already? Because there's something there, like there's a disconnect that. There's something in your mind that says, I can't do this, whatever that is. And the $1 million would allow me to do that. Like there's a barrier, right? But the $1 million would allow me to remove that barrier so that I can proceed forward. I think that's the really at the heart of the conversation of like, okay, like what would it allow you to do? And for different people, it's different things. For some people, it's like, well, it would allow me to protect my family. Like it would allow me to remove the stress of not paying my bills on time. It would allow me to actually bless others, right? And what's so funny is that we think that we need all that to do it, and we can do that without any of that. There's so many different ways that we can do it. I just think that it's kind of like a blind spot, right? Like it's back here somewhere and we just can't see it.
Yeah.
You can from your angle, right? You can see it back here, but I have no clue it's back here, right? Until I get to have an amazing conversation with you. And then you're like, hey, Omar, turn around. I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's been there the whole time. I had no idea, but that's really exciting. Now that I know that that's there, I'm going to be able to do something with it. And I think that's like the conversations that we can have to say, oh, like this thing was here this whole time. I've been living freaked out because of these particular situations, and I thought that I couldn't. And you helped me realize, oh my gosh, I had that potential. I had that ability to do it the whole time. I just didn't know. Right. And that's what gifting or being charitable, or, doing nice things for others. I think that a lot of times that's like that too. Like we think we have to spend money. We think that doing good for others has to be like, oh, I got to give them money. It's like, nah, man, there's so many amazing things that we could do. Even just sharing about, what's there for you can make a difference and inspire others to do amazing things as well.
Yeah. How do you feel about the comment that this conversation kind of reminded me of it? Money just makes you of more of who you are. And so we play those if only I had the $1 million, if only I won the lottery, then I'll do this or I'll do that. And I mean, that's just not take money out of the equation. That's just anything in life. And I think oftentimes we spit out hypotheticals and we forget to live in like actual reality. And so where I see that conversation, that saying going is that like, basically what you're saying is like, you don't have to have money in the bank to help people. Like you have 2 hands, 2 feet, get walking, get digging, And oftentimes it's like, we're always like waiting for this change to happen when we actually have the ability to make change where we are. And money doesn't change that.
Right. Yeah, no. And look, it's one of those things. It's again, going back to context. Now we're not going to be like completely oblivious to the fact that we live in a culture that runs on money, right? Like things need to get paid. You got to pay your electric bill, your water bills, things like that, right? So I'm not talking about that. What I am talking about though is how do we take those things and really get beyond that? So, talking about studies, our industry does a lot of studies. And one of the other studies, and I can't remember the exact number, but what they found was people that had millions upon millions saved up said that, wow, if I just had a little bit more, if I just had this much more, then that would actually allow me to do this. And so, but we found that all the way through, from people that didn't have, what we would consider a lot of money, to the people that have, that you would look at and say, are you kidding me? Like, what do you need a little bit more for? But I think we see that though, like, so now how we see that is like, if we take a look at, some of these, lately, especially lately with, this whole pandemic and things like that, there's been a lot of focus on businesses where top execs are taking these, they're getting these giant payouts, right? And then you have these other people that are getting furloughed or they're getting laid off, right? And they're saying, well, how can this guy or how can this lady, how can they take that extra payout when these other people down here, they're not getting paid? And I think that kind of comes back to that same mentality of like, I need that little bit more for that cushion. But those are the conversations that I get to help people out with, is like, okay, look, in life, there's what's happening right now. And then there's this idea of what's happening right now. Right. And that's not always the same thing. So what I help people do is I help people remove that idea or that thought of what they think is happening and just stick to what's happening. Because when we can see it for what it is, then it removes a lot of the anxiety or things like that. Right. So what that could look like is, hey, I'm freaking out because I messed up and I didn't pay on some credit cards or something, right? It's funny. Have you ever talked to somebody where they like missed a payment or something, and you're like, oh, I'm the worst person. Okay, they're like, well, I did this. Oh, I didn't pay this. Oh, I didn't pay this. Right? Well, yeah, you didn't pay it, but there's something there that you're telling yourself that you're a bad person because of it, right? And that's not the case at all. You're not a bad person. You didn't, you're not a horrible person. It's just that this happened. You didn't make a bill, or you didn't pay this, or you took money out of a 401k, and that's it, right? We don't need to carry all that baggage. And it's so funny because I got some good friends of ours, that they do coaching and things like that. And one of the things that they talk about, they're like, you know what it looks like? It looks like you're saying, oh, well, this happened to me when I was little, so I'm never going to trust you again. And then, this happened to me over here when I was in high school, and you broke my heart, so I'm never, forget it. I'm always going to dump people first. And then this happened, and then all of a sudden you're walking around with all this stuff, and you're like, hey, you want to go out on a date? And people are looking at you like, you have too much baggage. Well, we do the same thing in different areas too. So what I help people do is just unload it all. Just, don't, like, it is what it is. That's all. Not a big deal. Okay. You did it. What we're looking at is, what do you want to create for yourself in your future, so that you really get to walk, instead of being down here like, oh my gosh, I did all those things. You get to be empowered and like, oh, wait a second. Like, okay, what happened 3 years ago have anything to do with what I'm doing right now? Nothing. So if there's nothing there, then I'm free to walk through it and just keep on going. Right. And that's really what I want to do. So that when people, when we finish our conversations, they feel empowered, like, oh, I got this. Like, oh my gosh, I was worried about that. Forget about it. Like, I'm good. Like, I can keep moving forward.
I'm glad you kind of brought up the baggage and stuff, because oftentimes we attach ourselves to our past, and we completely define ourselves by our past, but we know, like, we're not our past. Like, but people attach themselves to the future. And it's like, okay, well, I guess I'll see you when you become that, but then there's the important. So both are important. Both sides are important. Where you've been is just as important as where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one factor that plays into is the now. What are you doing now?
Yeah.
And what I love about, in our conversations about money and stuff is, like, you're not just setting people up to be like, hey, let's look at your future. You're helping them look at, like, what they can do now to enjoy that money now, to give that money now. And you're also looking at their past mistakes and being like, okay, I know what you're capable of. We're staying away from there, or we're just changing it up just a little bit.
Yeah. And it's so funny because you're right. Like, so the past, what's that we think who we are is because of the past. And I love that you say that, right? Well, I'm this way because this happened, or I'm always wound up tight because when I was younger, this happened. I just can't I can't deal with that. Right. And that's what we call, like, filing for future reference, right? You've heard that, like, well, I'm just going to file that for future reference. That ain't going to happen again. Right. But what's so funny is that that's just our past. That actually has no bearing on what's going on. And we think that we're living into this future, but we're really not. right? Or actually, everything that we do, if we take a look, like psychologically, is what they call schemas. Well, schema is just a network of how we think based upon everything that's happened in the past, right? Which is why if you've been burnt from putting your hand on the stove, you see that fire on the stove, you're not just going to put that stove without making a conscious decision of, okay, I'm going to burn myself, because you're like, oh nope, I know that if I do this, this is what's going to happen. But the thing is that our brains can't differentiate like a real threat like that from a fake threat, right? So, which is why like people that are like are scared of like spiders, right, or snakes. There's a difference between, you know, a snake being a foot in front of me and they can bite me versus a snake being 20 feet away and me freaking out over it, right? And the problem is that our brains can't differentiate the difference between a false fear and a real fear, because it just, all it does is our brain sends chemicals and we get and it gets our bodies all, you know, worked up. Well, guess what? That happens stuff like paying your bills on time. That happens with stuff like, oh, I took money out of here. So when your body way, it feels real, and that's why people get freaked out. I mean, people do all kinds of like stuff that can really hurt themselves because of it. And so what I try to do is I just try to share that, hey, wait a second, I get that happened, and I get that that's traumatic. I get that started shaping how you see the world. And you got to understand, a lot of times when these things happen, they happen when you're a kid. I mean, if I ask people, Brian, what's your first recollection around money? About how old do you think you were when you think about your first recollection of money or your first lesson in money? How old do you think you were at the time?
This is one of the first conversations we had. I said,
Yeah.
I was 5 years old. I was in the hospital.
Yeah.
And every time the people would come into my room and put their spare change in a bag, and in exchange for that, I would tell them a quote from Forrest Gump. You know, so they come in 25 cents, and I would be like, oh, Mama said life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
Right.
You know, and people just went nuts for it. And I like got so much money. I don't even know what happened to that money. I don't even know if it was a lot. It felt like a lot as a kid. Yeah. But that money's no longer in my life. But this, I probably spent it all like on Tootsie Rolls, and my nose was drooling all the time because I was allergic to chocolate. My mom's just like, oh, he's going to die anyways. He might go doing something he loves, like eating Tootsie Rolls.
Well, oh my gosh, dude, you always kill me. But here's what's so great about that. So a couple things out of that, right? So first off, when you saw that happen, what did you say to yourself? All of a sudden you were like, oh my gosh. What did you say? Like, what did you tell yourself when you saw that happening?
I was like, probably like, awesome. Like more Tootsie Rolls. Like I saw the transaction that can happen because of money. Here, people are giving me money. I'm giving them a service. Yeah. And then I can go and I can get my fix. My Tootsie Roll fix.
Dude, and you were 5, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So here's what's so great about that. Your story, though it's unique to you, is actually not unique when it comes to human beings. When I ask these type of questions, like people recall back 4, 5, 6, 7. And something that happened way back then formed a thought like, oh, if I offer a service, people pay me, and then I can get what I want, right? And so, and everybody's different. So for some people, it's like, oh, that. For other people, it could be like, dude, when I was young, this happened, and I like ended up losing a bunch of money, and I got in a lot of trouble from my parents. So, and that like formed this thought of like, I got to be protective of my money because I'm going to get in trouble. But what happens is it's that thought that carries on. And what's so crazy is that as an adult, we subconsciously will continue that behavior. and here's what we don't see. So sometimes, here's the thing: it's a double-edged sword, right? So it can really help you in a lot of cases because it's helped you survive. That's why we keep it, right? Because that, we keep doing it because it works, right? The thing is that it doesn't always work all the time. But when it doesn't work, we don't let it go. We say, well, it's worked before, so I just got to keep trying to shove it in there and shove it in there and shove it in there until it does work, right? And what I try to show people, what I do is in the conversation, I help them explore that comes from when they were really young, and they can see, oh my gosh, I've been doing that everywhere. Like I did that in high school, I did it in college, I did it when I got married, and I'm doing it now as an adult. I'm doing it now at 40, 50, 60 years old, and I had no clue that it was my 5-year-old self that was actually guiding me. And two things come out of it. Number one, people see like, oh my gosh, I don't have to do that every time, right? Like I can, if it works, but if it's not working, I can actually choose not to do that, right? Which all of a sudden, that's profound, because it stops working you and you start working it. And with that, also, the other thing that we can do is like, can't we just start having a little bit of compassion for that 5-year-old self that was dealing with all that craziness, that said, oh, like, so in the different scenarios, we can start saying, oh my gosh, that's the 5-year-old me that's worried about it or is scared. Like, yeah, if I was 5, yeah, of course I'm gonna be worried about it, but I don't have to let it worry me anymore because I'm not 5. But it's those type of things that it's just really crazy. But you're right, man. It always starts back where like single digits, man. Like when we're just young. But what we don't see is that it continues to like jump in the driver's seat and says, hey, Brian, move out of the way. 5-year-old Bry's coming in.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's like, it's nuts. And again, we can let it work for us when we want it to, but now we can say, oh, there it is. Okay, I see it. You're in there right now. You know what? This is a perfect time, little Bry. You just go ahead and drive the wheel. You take the wheel, you drive, and you have and go. But just so you know, I might need to take you out of the driver's seat, and Brian now might have to jump in, right?
Yeah.
So that's a huge part of what I do.
Yeah, because to my other experiences, I told you one of the positive one. Yeah. But the second experience is like realizing for the first time how poor my family was, and how I didn't. And what drives me now is like I don't want my kids to be in that situation. I'm not saying that was a bad situation. Like we definitely persevered, and my family is better because of it.
Yeah.
And we can say that now, but in the time it was rough. And then the third thing is just like, as a Christian, finding out people saying, oh, money's bad, it's evil. So stay away from it. So those 3 stories, it's like I've really shaped who I am, right? So I'm just like, I know I'm driven by, I want to provide better for my kids and for my family now. Mm-hmm. And then 2 is, I know that I'm a great entertainer. People are willing to pay for my type of entertainment,
right?
And I can use that money to go and buy things I want. Yeah. But then the third one kicks in sometimes, and I'm just like, money's bad. Stop chasing it.
Yeah, right. And here's the thing: is that money's just money. Like it's just a tool, right? And that's what you're speaking to is like people misquote that all the time. By the way, they're like, "Oh, money's evil." No. It's not money that's evil. The quote itself is actually money. Yeah, the love of money is the root of all evil, right? And that's because you're taking away the love, right? You're taking away that love from something else, whether it's humanity, whether it's God, whatever that is for you, right? And you're focusing it on the money, then the money becomes the priority. Remember earlier when we were talking about like where our conversation comes from, right? So if your commitment is love of money, guess what? Everything's going to be based around that, and that's how your language is going to come out. So money is just a tool. It's like a hammer, right? Like a hammer is neither good or bad. I can build some awesome stuff with it, or I can destroy all kinds of things with it, right? I can bring destruction. But the hammer itself is neither good nor bad. It's just a hammer. But it's what are we going to choose to do with it? Unfortunately, what happens many times is that we don't realize that we're not actually choosing. We're just kind of running on autopilot, and that's not actually a choice. That's just us making decisions. And decisions are based on, one thing is going to hurt me and one thing's not. So I'm going to make a decision because this is better. And then you just cut off the other option, right? Making a choice is actually saying, oh, I, I'm going to choose this because I say I'm going to choose it, right? Because life isn't always something that it gives us two great choices. Sometimes life, says, hey, you have cancer. Choose it. Right? Yeah. And that's, and we can try not to choose it and try to, fight it and this and that, but that's not empowering. That's draining. That, that can lead to a life of like, and by the way, when I'm having conversations, in my office with people, it's the same thing. It goes the same thing in that area, right? They're like, oh, I don't, they're frustrated in this and that. It's like, no, like, okay. But what I try to do is let them see that they can actually choose it for what it is. And from there, then move on.
Yeah. Well, I was telling people, like, you're going to have to choose between two bad things sometimes. You're going to have to choose between a bad thing and a great thing. And that's probably 90% of our decision making. But because we have those two options, when it comes to choosing between two great things, we automatically assume like, oh, one of the thing has to be bad or one thing has to be good. And when your whole perspective can change, like, even if it's a bad circumstance, like, how can you make it a good circumstance? So you're not always putting, oh, there has to be a good guy, there has to be a bad guy, right? And even like when we try to like argue with people, like, we have to be the good guy, they have to be the bad guy because I'm right in this argument. And no, it doesn't work like that. Like, we're both people,
right?
And if you just consider yourself wrong or consider the other person's point of view, you just might be better off instead of looking at it as a bad, good, bad, that. Like, sometimes it does take a level of acceptance for our behaviors, even if it's past, if it's now, in order to kind of tweak it. And
well, and I heard someone one time, a really wise woman, I heard her say, if you somebody was complaining about they were complaining about their mother, and in this particular situation, like, it was a bad deal. Like, the mother was what we would say like extremely abusive, like physically, verbally, like not what we would say is a good situation, right? And this person was just like they're what some of my friends say, they were on it. Like, they were just on it. They wouldn't get off it. And they're just like, she's this and this and da da da, and just ream her. And most people would say, well, she has the right to. She had to deal with all this, right? But what was so cool was my friend, she's so wise. She turns to her and she says, while she was getting all this stuff out, and she started asking her, so what was it like for your mother, like growing up and doing these things? And then she started, well, my mom had this and that and dealt with this and still light, right? And she said, try on that that right now you're dealing with this because this is where you're coming from, and this is why it feels this way to you. And it's not that it's right or wrong, it's just how it feels that way to you, right? And she said, try on that if you would have experienced the exact same things as your mother had experienced at the exact same moments that your mother experienced, you would actually have the same occurring that she does. Like, you guys would have, you could have very well came out seeing life through the exact same lenses, right? So, and the reason why she was saying that, what she was getting to is that we all create this idea of what life is based on a particular situation and like when it happened, right? Because you ever notice like sometimes you can be upset about something, right? And then like the next day, that same situation doesn't get you upset. So it's like there's just different, like, and I say this like with my kids, like one day my kids can be driving me up the wall, right? And then the next day they'll do the exact same thing, and I'm like, whatever, you know. And so, but the point of that is that we all respond a little bit differently, right, to particular situations, but it's all unique to us. So, and going back to what you were saying about the arguing back and forth with people, oh, I'm right or you're wrong or this or that or whatever else. What if we started, in that conversation, really, instead of coming from the place of let me prove you wrong, which is what I think happens a lot of times in these arguments or these conversations. We see it in politics all the time, right? Instead of coming from a place of I'm right, you're wrong, let me prove it to you. What if we came from a place of, oh, what was that like for you? To start kind of opening up like, oh, an understanding of what's actually happening. Because then we start seeing that, it doesn't necessarily have to be a right or wrong. Like you can make it a right or wrong if you want to, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can actually start saying like, oh, that's why you see it like this.
Mm-hmm.
I get that now. Now, that doesn't mean you got to agree with it, right? I don't need to agree with you, but I can be like, oh, okay, if I would have saw it that way, I can see, okay, yeah, I get that, right? But I think that opens up more conversation and it allows people to really just start sharing what's there on their heart. And it's that authentic conversation that I truly believe makes a huge difference in whatever it is that we're dealing with.
Yeah. I think there's a quote that I read is the problem with the world isn't that there's right and wrong. The problem with the world is everybody thinks they are right.
Yes.
Well, Omar, unfortunately, we have to kind of wrap this up.
Yeah.
One question I do want to ask from the comments is, how do you help your kids view with their view of money?
Oh, perfect. So look, remember earlier we were talking about how we get our ideas of money from when we're a kid, right? So what I found in most conversations is that most children learn about money or how money should be treated based upon their parents' behaviors or what their parents say about money. So, right? So there was something, and so there's something in there for all of us, and it could be a little bit or it could be a lot, depending on everybody else. But if we can start having these conversations of showing kids early on what, how they can utilize money or, what structures they can do for themselves, and we show it by example, it'll make a huge difference. And here's where we see it a lot. So what I've seen it a lot is a lot of my millennial clients, right? My millennial clients, I mean, they are in such a great position. Like, look, they knew that they didn't have to go into work way before the pandemic, right? Like that's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do it from the house, right? That like they're so far advanced in so many things, but there's things that they haven't experienced before. Millennials haven't experienced a bull market before. The last crazy bull market that we had was in 2008, right? And when the market that's when the market, think of I'm sorry, they've never experienced a bear market. I misspoke. They've experienced a bull market all their lives. So a bull, think of it like, a bull in a china shop. Everything's shaking up, right? And it's going crazy, right? That's when the market's going up. They haven't experienced a bear market, is what I meant to say. A bear market, think of like a bear hibernating, right? Like bear down, right? They've never experienced that before. So all they've seen is things going really great. And so the conversations that I've been having, they're like, oh, what do I do? And like, I'm like, well, who do you normally turn to, or who do you normally have a conversation about money? I'm like, well, my parents, right? I'm like, okay. They're like, but I really don't want to ask my parents because I'm an adult now and I should know these things, right?
Yeah.
So I would say have these conversations with your kids. One of the things that I do actually that works really well, my kids love playing Monopoly. Like they love it. My 9-year-old, my 12-year-old, and by the way, I've never beat my 12-year-old in Monopoly. Like she crushes me. Never beat her, right? But what I've done in Monopoly, what they learn, I've done little things like, I'll be like, they see me setting aside money, and they're like, well, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Setting aside money." And they're like, "Well, why are you setting it aside?" And I'm like, "Because I learned a long time ago that I should set aside 10% of everything that I get, just in case I need it later on to buy properties, or in case I get in trouble and I need to pay some bills." And they're like, "Oh," and then they start putting aside 10%, right? And what's so funny is that they learn these little things, right? And what I'll do is I'll have it set aside and I won't touch it. And I'll get all the way down to like maybe no money in my hand. And they're like, "Well, would you like to buy that property that you landed on?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't have any." They're like, "Well, you got some in your emergency in that other stash." I was like, "Yeah, but that's for emergencies. I can't touch it." And they're like, "Oh." So they're constantly watching, but man, they got that down now to like, if I forget, like if someone pays me like, $10 rent for whatever thing that I have on there, and if I don't set aside $1 for that 10%, they're like, "Where's your 10%?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, thank you, I appreciate that." But they crush it, and my 12-year-old, she's got that down. She's the one that says, "Dad, I'm going to be a CEO one day." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, good for you, honey." She's like, "No, really, I'm going to be a CEO one day." But they get it, man. They learn it early, and it's those kind of things. They do that now. So when they get money from family or relatives, things like that, or friends for birthdays, you know what they do? They take that money and they set it to the side, and then they got it, and then they know that the other stuff they can use for whatever. But they learn those habits. So yeah, those are really great things that we can do. The other thing that they can do, they can always reach out to me. I've always got things going on for families where they can learn, webinars, all kinds of stuff. So, but I would say start there, play Monopoly.
I think that you may be the only family that is brought closer together because of Monopoly. I hate it's been destroying families ever since. I never touched a game. Okay, I'll be like, screw this. I know if you're not first in the game, then like, the chances are pretty much gone. There's a couple of tricks you can do, but I just don't have the patience for it.
Well, you know what though? Think about
the guy.
But if you think about all the great things that they learn from Monopoly, one of the things that I like to do when I play Monopoly is I like to play without getting like, I play where I get excited when I win money, or when I, because we play like house rules. Like if you land on free parking, all the taxes and everything that you've been paying on and things like that, we put it in the middle. So if you land on free parking, you get to win all that like a lottery, right? So when I play, if I get extra things, I get excited. I'm like, yeah, I got extra money, or I won this, right? But here's what I don't do, and I do this on purpose. If I lose money, or I make a mistake, or I make a decision that has me potentially lose, or when I lose, I don't freak out about it. I'm totally like chill. I'm like, oh, lost, okay. And I do that on purpose because I want my children to learn that money's just a tool. I don't want them to think that money's the end all be all. Because trust me, man, them kids are watching. They watch like hawks. That's why we get so annoyed at them when they call us out. When they call us out on stuff, we get annoyed because it's true. They're speaking truth, right? They're like, you do this. You're like, shut up, right? But it's true. Like we do that. So I really use that to show them behaviors of like how I treat money. I just treat money as a tool. Like I don't have to let money ruin my life or bring anxiety, but I can also rejoice in it too.
Yeah. How can people find you?
Yeah. So people can, if they're on Facebook, like we are right now, people can just look up Omar Maldanado, Thrive in Financial. They can go through there. If they go to my, regular page, Omar Maldanado, again, not a whole lot of Omar Maldonados out there, on Facebook. So you can find my stuff on there, but, I have a website, again, through Facebook. They can link on there. They can click on my website. They can reach out and look, if they just want to have conversations, there's, I don't have, when I'm talking with people, I'm always looking forward to like just meeting people. You know, to reach out to me to just talk about things, or just say, hey, I heard you say this or whatever. I'd like to know a little bit more. Like, that's super easy. Just reach out. I love it. I mean, man, like,
Yeah.
there's a, that's a big piece of who I am. The people that I like to work with are, I like, it's because I like you. So I'm always open to conversation.
Well, Omar, thank you very much for being on Friends of Bride today. Hopefully,
Yeah.
I love the conversation that we were having going back and forth. So I hope in the future you'd be up for doing another episode and we
Absolutely.
can dive into things. So I appreciate you being a good friend and always being available. Even though I freaked out that I didn't have a guest today, and I called you, and then you're like, can't talk right now, but I can text. And I thought you didn't even like text me back, but then I realized, oh, my phone's being messed up. I need to give him some grace. But so thank you very much for being on the show today, and just yeah.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it. I always love hanging out with you, man. When we start doing the bonfires again, I'll make sure I send you that invite. You can come back over once all this stuff gets cleared up. So
yeah. All right. Well, thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. We have Omar. I said Omar.
Oh, it sounded great.
Maldanado here at Thriving Financial. Reach out to him if you have any more questions, or leave your questions in the comment below. Thank you for watching. This is Friends of Brry, where your friends are my friends and my friends are your friends. Thank you very much.
See ya.